Today we're going to learn how to find the inverse of a function, okay? It's only 2 steps. Some of them will be very easy, some of them get a little more complicated. We'll start out with some easy examples. Okay, the first example is y equals 4x. They want you to find the inverse of this function. Step 1 is switch the x and y. Okay, step 1 is switch the x and y. Okay, now what I mean by that is this y will now become x. And over here, instead of 4x, it'll become 4y. Okay, step 2 is solve for y. Okay, once you have switched the x and the y, you're just going to solve for the y. So look over here. How would we solve for that y? What does solve for y actually mean? Solve for y means divide it? Well, in this case, yes. But what does solve for y in any problem mean? Doesn't it mean get it by itself? Okay, because if you're supposed to solve for a letter, you're going to isolate the letter, which means get it by itself. Well, in this case, for the y to be by itself, the 4 has to go away. And how can we make that 4 go away? Divided by 4. And the reason it's divided by 4 is because up here it's being multiplied by 4. See, this is 4y, which means 4 times y. To undo 4 times y, you divide by 4. Now, we also have to divide by 4 over here, because whatever you do to one side, you have to do to the other. So now the left side is x divided by 4. The right side, what is 4 divided by 4? 1. So we have 1y, but do we really have to write the 1? No. So now have we solved for y? Is y by itself? Yes. So we've solved for it. You're done. Now that is the correct answer. I normally just like to go ahead and switch it like this, y equals x over 4, but you don't have to do that. I just like to write it, y equals first. But you don't have to. Either one of these is an acceptable answer. Okay, now we're going to go to example 2. Can I erase example 1? Yeah, I'll give you a second. Okay, can I erase? Alright, example 2. Example 2 is y equals x minus 6. They want you to find the inverse of this function. Well, what's the very first step we need to do? Okay, what will it look like once we've done that? Right? Okay, now that we've done that, we need to go to step 2, solve for y. What would we do here? Add this 6 to get it away from the y. Because when you add 6 to a negative 6, it cancels out, and then it leaves y by itself, correct? But then, whatever you do to one side, you have to do to the other. So now we need to add 6 to the x. What is x plus 6? That's x times 6. Right, it's just x plus 6. You can't actually combine those. This is a variable, this is a constant. They're not like terms, so you just have to leave it as x plus 6. Okay, and that is the final answer. If you wanted to, you could rewrite it as y equals x plus 6, but either one of these is acceptable. It's the same thing. It's just I prefer to put the y first. Okay, example 3. Can I erase? Alright, example 3. Y equals 3x plus 5. I'm going to give you about 1 minute to try this one by yourself before I go over it. Okay, the first thing we have to do is switch the x and the y. When we do that, it'll say x equals 3y plus 5. Then we're supposed to solve for y, so how would we start that process? Right, on both sides. Okay, so now we have x minus 5 equals 3y because all that canceled. Now what do we do? Divide divide by 3, divide by 3, and so y equals x minus 5 over 3. Or, if you wanted to rearrange it, y equals x minus 5 over 3. Alright, example 4. F of x equals 4x squared plus 6. Okay, what is different about this one? Right, there's no y equals, it says f of x equals. But what do we all know about f of x? It's the same thing as y. So the very first thing you could do before you really actually start the problem is just cover that up with a y. Now I know you're not able to erase it like I did, but you could just write a big y on top of the f of x. Because f of x and y are the same thing. Okay, now we need to switch the x and y. What will it look like once we've done that? Correct. Okay, now we need to solve for y, so how would we start that? Okay, and that cancels, and then subtract it over here, and you're left with x minus 6 equals 4y squared. Now to solve for y, what would we do next? Divide by 4. Those cancel. Divide this by 4. So now we have x minus 6 over 4 equals y squared. Have we solved for y? It's squared. What? Right. To get rid of the squared, you square root. But since we square rooted this side, you have to square root that side. So we're left with the square root of x minus 6 over 4 equals y. The reason y is by itself is because the square root canceled out the squared. Okay? Example 5. 6. Can I erase? Alright, example 5. Y equals 1 half x plus 4. Okay, so what should I do first? Okay, what will that look like? Okay, then what should I do? Okay, on both sides, so that gives me what? Right, x minus 4 equals 1 half y, because 4 minus 4 cancel to 0. Okay, yes, normally when we get here, it doesn't just say 1 half times y because they're touching, so normally we would divide, but don't write this down. If we chose to go with division, it's technically right, but it's not how they're going to work it out on the test, and so therefore your answer would not match the one on the test. Because we don't like to divide a fraction by a fraction. So instead of dividing a fraction by a fraction, you learned this in middle school. What do we do? Keep.
Change flip.
Right, keep, change, flip. So instead of dividing a fraction by another fraction, you keep this fraction, but instead of dividing, you multiply by the reciprocal, which is 2 over 1. Now the reason we did that is because look, won't this 1 and that 1 cancel? And this 2 and that 2 will cancel, leaving the y all by itself on that side of the problem. Okay, but since we multiplied by 2 over 1 over here, don't we have to multiply by 2 over 1 over there? But remember, you're multiplying by everything over there. So you're multiplying by all of it, and you show that by putting it in parentheses. So now what do you think you would do? Distribute, which is multiplication. What is 2 over 1 times x? 2x. What is 2 over 1 times negative 4? Negative 8. And so then you're done. And you could, if you wanted to at that point, rewrite it as y equals 2x minus 8. On the test, they're going to rewrite it with y at the beginning. Equals whatever equals. Can I erase? Alright, example 6. Y equals 6 over x plus 6. Okay, what do I need to do first? Okay, what will it look like once I've done that? Okay, now what do I need to do? Okay, on this side when you do that it cancels because 6 minus 6 is 0. On this side you can't combine them, so you just leave it as x minus 6. Okay, now once you've copied what you need to look up, and I want you just to watch, and then I'll give you time to copy at the end. Okay, this becomes a little tricky here because normally when you're solving for a letter, you don't ever move that letter, correct? You just move everything else to the other side. But in this case, there's an exception because we want the y to be by itself, but there's a 6 up above it. Well, you're not allowed to mess with the numerator until the denominator is gone. Like, you can't just divide that by 6 and divide this by 6. You cannot ever mess with the numerator until the denominator is gone. So this is one time you're going to have to move the y even though it's what we're trying to isolate. How would you move this y to the other side? Multiply it. Okay, don't write, just keep watching. I'll give you time to copy. Then you multiply all of this over here by the y. Okay, over here they cancel each other out. And now you have y times x minus 6 equals 6. But I don't, at this point normally when you distribute, but remember we're trying to get y by itself, so you don't want to attach it to more things. You want it by itself, so all of this needs to now go away. Well, isn't all of that being multiplied by y? So we can divide it all at the same time. Since all of it's multiplied by y, we divide it all. And so you're ended up with y equals 6 over x minus 6. Okay, go ahead and take time and copy that example. Okay, example 7. G of n equals 2 over n minus 3. Okay, what's different about this one? We're just using different letters, but really it's all the same thing. This g of n is the same thing as f of x, which is the same thing as y. The only reason they use the n over here is because they use the n over here when normally we're accustomed to seeing an x. So we just need to replace that n with an x. And now we're ready to go. So what do I do first? Okay, what will it look like once they're switched? Okay, so now I'm trying to solve for y, so what would I do first? Add this 3 to the other side. So now we have x plus 3 equals 2 divided by y. Okay, now to solve for y, what do I need to do? Right, I'm trying to get y by itself, but I cannot mess with that 2 until the y is gone. So to get the y to the other side, you have to multiply. It cancels over there, and over here, I'm not going to actually distribute it out, I'm just going to leave it like that. Because the next step, I'm going to need to do what? Divide by x plus 3 on both sides so that y will be completely by itself, and that leaves me with y equals 2 over x plus 3. Okay, page 24. I'm going to work a few of them with you, then I'm going to give you time to work several, and then I'll take questions at the end. Number 1, before we can even start this problem, what do we need to do? Right, the g of n will become, right, and the n will become x. Okay, so now we're ready to go. What's step 1? Switch our x and y. So when I do that, what will it look like? Right, x equals y minus 3 over 2. Once I've switched the x and the y, what am I supposed to do next? Solve for y, so that will start with multiplying by that 2. You always have to get rid of the denominator first. So to get rid of divided by 2, we multiply by 2. We also multiply by 2 over here. So now this is just 2x, and the right side, this cancels, so we're left with y minus 3. So now to solve for y, what's my final step? Add 3. And so 2x plus 3 equals y, and you're done. Or you could rewrite it as y equals 2x plus 3, same thing. on these, I would probably circle your final answer because it'll get kind of cluttered on your paper because there's not a lot of space, and that way on the 10 square this week, you'll know what the final answer is. Okay, let's look at number 2. All right, number 2, what should I do first? Replace this g of x with a y, and then that's already an x, so we're good to go. Okay, now what do I do? Okay, what will it look like when it's switched? Well, no, I don't switch anything but the letters. So x equals, okay, now what do I do? Right now I start trying to solve for y, so I add that 1 to the other side, and now I have x plus 1 equals negative y. Is it the answer? Why not? There's a negative 1 beside this y. And how is that negative 1 connected to the y? Multiplication, so we need to divide it. Okay, so y equals, this will actually reduce. What's x divided by negative 1? Okay, look, isn't there a 1 right here? 1 divided by negative 1 is a negative 1x, so you don't have to write the 1. And then 1 divided by negative 1 is negative 1. Or if you wanted to, you could have rewritten that as y equals negative x minus 1. Yep, that's done. Okay, now I'm going to give you about 10 to 12 minutes to work as many as you can off just this page 24, and then the last 5 minutes I'll take questions.